here, we're just recognizing the great amount of responsibility that our friends and customers in pharmacy have. I actually started as a pharmacy tech a number of years ago and joined Sonicu a number of years after that. So I understand some of that. Again, my name is Michael Deemer. I'm the channel manager here for Sonicu. Jason?
Yeah, my name is Jason Young. I'm the CTO at Sonicu. I've actually been working at Sonicu for over a decade as we built this platform from the ground up to really serve, customers like you. And so what we're going to share with you today is a lot of our experience and expertise, and what we've seen pain points that either current customers have had in the past, or even things that we've built into our system to help address concerns that people have had in the past. And so I think this will be pretty interesting. We work across a large swath of different industries: healthcare, life science, and government. And how did we learn this? Well, we started actually working with sound monitoring in the NICU. And as we did that, we started getting more questions around how can we support temperature, humidity, differential pressure, things like that. So we've evolved our platform over the past decade to really meet those use cases. We have a lot of large customers. We continue to grow. We're really seeing a lot of trending for customers in the market to move from manual processes or even semi-manual processes utilizing things like Excel to a fully automated continuous monitoring solution that integrates with other packages they're using to do their jobs on a daily basis.
Yeah, so when you think about Sonicu, we kind of play in the middle of the full scope of when you think about environmental monitoring. You have the asset protection for alarming and notifications, regulatory compliance checkbox down the list, and eliminating and reducing manual processes that are currently out there. So we're trying to help people transition from a manual process like filling out a document like you see on the left and hitting the easy button, and just simply automating that process. So the three things that we're going to focus on today that are the three common mistakes that we see: confusing control versus compliance, assuming systems with alarms are all the same, and really not thinking about tomorrow and the changes that could be on the horizon.
So before we get into this, here are some kind of questions to be thinking about. We're not going to go through all of these, but these are kind of the common pain points we see with different customers in this area, especially things around, how do we streamline our logging? How do we ensure we have our NIST traceable calibrations up to date at all times? How do we prevent reportable losses? So these are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about whenever you're looking at a continuous monitoring platform. So mistake number one, confusing control and compliance. So control, we're talking about things like a building automation system. I might refer to that as a BAS in this presentation, as opposed to a compliance platform, something like our Sonicu monitoring platform. So there are different solutions with different goals, and it's important to understand kind of where both sides are coming from and what the benefits there are. So one example that I think of is we have a customer that is a major Midwestern healthcare system, and they, for a long time, had all of their pharmacy compliance data through their building automation system with their facilities team. And they were happy with it for a while until they realized that every time the board of pharmacy came in, they weren't going to the facilities team. They were going to the head of pharmacy. So now the head of pharmacy has to go work with their facilities team, pull the data from the BAS, take that data, potentially manipulate it into reports that are satisfactory. They have to pull together their calibration information from a different system to present that. So now all of a sudden, what should be a pretty easy process of pressing a button, having a report that has everything, board of pharmacy looks at and checks it off. Now it's turning into a multi-day project because they can't even do the work by themselves. They have to get facilities involved, and then they have to do all this additional manipulation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about ways we can address that concern. So whenever other people decide how to help you do your compliance work, right? We talk about a BAS, your facilities team's choosing it for their needs. Reporting is a secondary concern. Other important things like audit trails, normally very limited and not really useful in a lot of the areas you might be working in. The vendors are usually pretty inflexible. They're usually a little bit more expensive. And the system is usually pretty closed. You have a limited ability to modify it. The access can be limited. The facilities team doesn't really want other people messing around that system because that system has the ability to change how your actual facility is operating. And then it may not even have granular controls for alarms or permissions. It's not optimal. But whenever you decide, you're the subject matter expert, right? So you get to focus on the things that are important to you. Alerting, compliance, reporting, the type of equipment you're actually monitoring. But then past that, you can even look at the fact that your vendor should be focused on that regulatory compliance piece and helping you to, do things like segregate out different points of monitoring to different groups based upon what permissions they need to have, and hopefully get better alarming than you would have gotten with a system like a BAS. This is going to help you ensure your compliance and hopefully make your life easier.
So when we look at kind of the Venn diagram that we typically see in healthcare, you got your clinical side and your facility side. And so we try to play, or the system that you're looking at should play in the middle of that. Jason, if you could hit the, thank you. So agnostic data collection. So that would be going to the clinical side. So they have their own platform. We would consider that the compliance platform for your EM, your continuous environmental monitoring, for all your fridges, freezers, ambient temps, humidities, which means that you're receiving the compliance reporting and notifications, and you could also view the facilities data without having to access to BAS, BMS. And so can that vendor pull the data from the facilities team, BAS, BMS, and display it on your platform that you have access to? At the same time, a lot of times the facilities team needs to have access to that same data. And so can that provider then take that data and provide it to the BMS, BAS, so that the facilities team has their single pane of glass and the clinical team has their compliance platform, helping everybody adhere to the regulations that they need to abide by, including the clinical team, FDA, Board of Pharmacy.
Yeah, so overall in summary, making sure that your compliance and your control pieces aren't necessarily one and the same should help to make your life easier, especially whenever it comes to regulatory compliance. Mistake number two, we tend to see people that assume all systems with alarming are all the same. So one of our customers is a major Southeastern health system. They had an alarming package prior to moving to Sonicu, and they thought it was great until they realized, well, my alarming package can't do phone calls, or my alarming package will only send one reminder message. What they ended up having to do after they had purchased the system and invested in across their whole facility was actually staffing a call center 24/7 to monitor those alarms and repeat calls to their teammates to make sure the alarms are resolved. And so kind of what this reminded us of is, if you're looking at alarming, you might kind of look at it kind of like this picture where you say, oh, okay, there are small differences, right? Oh, the chick has an orange hat instead of a green hat. But whenever you actually dig into it and try to use it, you might realize the differences are a little bit more like this. Yeah, there's a chicken there, but it's not exactly the same chicken. So things to think about. First of all, when we're looking at alarming, our first goal is to make sure that people receive the notifications. How are users receiving those alarms? Is it their 10,000th email that's come into their inbox? That may not be effective in helping to drive the action you want. Why are they receiving alarm notifications? If you are someone overseeing, a multiple location facility, you may not always be the right person to receive that alarm. There may be someone better suited to receive that alarm and take first action on it. And then finally, when are they receiving alarms? If you're only getting an alarm one time, that may not be the most effective way to make sure someone actually takes action. They may need to be reminded. Maybe they're in the middle of something they can't stop right away. So making sure you have the ability to continuously notify people until those alarms are resolved is very helpful. So let's say that you did get your alarm, you got your notification. You then need that to be a call to action. So think about the fact that if you're inundated with alarms 24/7, at some point you're going to stop being as responsive to them. We call this alarm fatigue. So we focus a lot on when people actually want to get notified. If you're on vacation, you're at the beach, do you really want to get notified if you're off work and it's not your responsibility at that time? If you're starting to have your phone vibrate because you're getting alarm notifications, you're on vacation, it's going to make you less likely to respond to those alarms in the future. Or even just think about kind of false alarms. Do you want to get an alarm whenever the power goes out? Probably. Do you want to get an alarm whenever someone just opens a door? Probably not. And the same thing if we think about fridges and freezers. Do you want to get an alarm whenever someone opens a freezer, removes something, and closes it back? Or do you want to get an alarm only whenever a freezer door is maybe left ajar? That's going to help you actually take action on the important notifications. And then finally, making sure that those alarms match that user responsibility. We talked a little bit about that before, but it really is important. You want to make sure that every person that receives that alarm feels compelled to take some action to help resolve that before anything happens, whether that's a loss of product or whether that's simply making your life harder whenever it comes time for regulatory compliance. And so the final part I want to talk about today is not planning for tomorrow. One of our customers is a nationwide infusion chain, and they have the CE Group's Prism system for their clean rooms. They love the Prism system. It's fantastic. The problem is that they have locations all over the country, and they don't have a great way from a corporate level to ensure that every single system is configured exactly the same way and that all their boxes are checked whenever it comes time for regulatory compliance. So whenever they're getting an audit, now all of a sudden at the corporate level, it becomes a fire drill every single time because they didn't have the ability to have visibility into that data. So now what should be a relatively regular occurrence and a somewhat stress-free occurrence, proving that you've been doing your continuous monitoring, which everyone should be doing, now turns into a whole thing. So we worked with them actually to help bring all of that data into our cloud platform. So not only do they get offsite alarming for their CE Group Prism system, but also they're able to use all of our reporting, alarming, everything there to look at that. And so they can actually check their entire fleet of locations to make sure they're in compliance at all times. And that's pretty interesting. So if we're talking about the future, the first thing is you want to make sure that you are future-proofing it in terms of other systems you're going to be working with. So how will your continuous monitoring system communicate to help you solve problems? Can it, for instance, enter work orders for your facilities team to help let them know, hey, we're going to need your assistance because we have an alarm on some of these points of monitoring? Can it interact with other platforms? We mentioned that CE Group Prism Clean Room system, but also, obviously Pharmacy Stars Compounding 360. If you're still manually logging that data in Pharmacy Stars 360, there's a better way to do that. And I think Keith's going to show a little bit of that integration after our presentation here. And as we go forward, you don't want to just make sure that the system's going to work today, but you want to make sure it's going to work in the future. So is your system going to be able to work with your IT team to ensure that you have secure platforms that'll work with the technology they're planning for, not only for today, but for 5 years from now? Maybe you don't have fantastic Wi-Fi. Maybe your cellular service isn't great. Do you have that flexibility in how you can get data out of your facility where it can be monitored and reported on? Also, just making sure that you're picking a vendor that's staying up with regulatory requirements. Requirements are always changing. A lot of the vendor platforms out there tend to kind of have a package, and it's been the same for about the last 7 years. So making sure that they are updating. Ask your vendors, how are you addressing new regulations? How are you updating the software? How are we going to be sure that in 5 years, this is still going to be meeting our needs and making our lives easier? And finally, you already have so many applications you have to use to do your job. We saw that poll at the start where over half of the participants have 2 or more systems they're using to log their environmental monitoring data. Try and find a system that's going to let you integrate across the board and it's going to let you monitor things that maybe you aren't even monitoring today. You may not need the status of your doors today, for instance. But in the future, if you do want to have that data in there to help you make a more compelling case to a regulator, make sure you can have that so you don't have one system for pressure and one system for temperature and one system for humidity. And then the final thing is making sure your system is going to age with grace. Pretty much everyone does a good job across the board of making sure on day one of your go live, your system is configured. But how are you sure a year, 3 years, 5 years down the road, your system is still configured to protect you? Are you sure it's still as good as it was that first day? So make sure your system is able to help give you status reports and health checks that tell you, yep, we have our thresholds set up. Everyone who's supposed to be receiving alarms is receiving them. They're logging into the system and they're taking action on those alarms in a timely manner. Those are all incredibly important considerations when you're looking at a system that's going to have a multiple year useful life.
And just to tag in on that, Jason, the feedback we've gotten from a lot of people is that soft dollar calculation goes into that total cost of ownership of a system as well. Something that some people may not include many times when evaluating different systems that are out there. So just to recap, we touched on confusing control versus compliance, separate, not equal, assuming systems alarming are the same, not planning for tomorrow and thinking about what's coming down the road, not only from a software standpoint and connectivity standpoint, but regulatory requirements as well. And so just to kind of recap, we're going to be sending out a helpful little continuous monitoring checklist to help you avoid these types of questions and mistakes and more, to kind of look at the common monitoring mistakes when choosing continuous monitoring platform. Should be a nice little simple PDF that you can go down through and, hey, here's a whole list of considerations you should think about when doing an evaluation. And so we'll email those out and follow up with everyone with that.
That'd be fantastic. And we find that people really like these checklists. We recently released one on a self-assessment readiness for 797. So that's very helpful, you guys. Appreciate it very much. Jason, Michael, thank you for the presentation. What I'd like to do is to ask attendees to post questions in the Q&A box. Give them a few minutes while they're doing that. I'm going to share my screen. Many of today's attendees are Compounding 360 customers. They're not all customers of ours, but let me just showcase how Sonicu can integrate directly with Compounding 360 and completely eliminate the manual process. So you should recognize the work screen I'm on, and I have set up an auto logger. Okay, I purchased for the sensors from Sonicu, have them set up in the office, and so map them in the scheduler. After I built the task template, I set the scheduler to read at 6, 11, 19 hours, and it auto logs it for me every day. That auto logging is made available. It's the same thing as if you're going to be manually entering that information. So when I go to look at my measurements, let's just say I jump from here to here, I can grab that temperature, grab this, run. Okay, there you go. Let's pick another one that I am probably monitoring. And run my report. So here, that same data you can see is capturing it. The times of day is capturing, and all the data points are below, even though it's auto logged. If I need to interact, just like any other record, I can interact. I can add notes to it. Equally the same, can print it out. So I've completely eliminated the workload of going and documenting it. I set it up so it's going in plan schedule when I want to do it. To set it up, just in it very simply, once you add this component to Compounding 360, we basically map to your, and this is an example of Sonicu. We map to different setups, we test it out, and it's set. Then the next step that we will do is you add your measure sites. And for those measure sites, and those who use the system know this, you would add in it's auto logged, and then there too you map, test the connection. That's step 2. Step 3 is go into your QC logs, add a template, and I think I have this daily environmental. I'll bring that up real quickly here. So you choose an auto log for your form type, map it to those spaces. You got that set up. And then the last step is simply setting your schedule. So again, let me go into my daily monitoring. Here you'll see when you have this in place and you're connected for auto logging, the schedule is slightly different because they'll add the retrieval time. So you set the 3 retrieval times that you want. And as I shared with you before, we have these set up to be retrieving them at 6, 11, and 19 hours. So it's really quite simple once we get it all in place. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Let's swing back to see if there's any questions that have surfaced. In fact, one thing I do hear from people, I guess just to answer this one real quickly, guys, is if someone already has an existing system in place, sensors in place, it's pretty sometimes challenging and expensive to rip and replace, to get approval to do that. Is there any kind of hybrid solutions that someone could pursue so they can go from that BAS to the perfect world you showed with the synergy, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we'd recommend there is, if you are in that situation, you can do a slower transition. So kind of a natural time to start transitioning things is if you're looking at whenever your calibration expirations are coming up. That's kind of a good time to start looking at whether you want to recalibrate those devices or go to a new solution. But if let's say you already have a system set up, maybe it's integrated through your BAS, but you're looking to get some of that advanced reporting, highly recommend getting an integration product. Sonicu, we offer our product that's called CloudLink. That CloudLink will actually pull your data from your BAS system into our cloud platform. It'll give you all of that alarming, all of that reporting. And then over time, you can start to figure out, well, if we need to add more monitoring, you can go with kind of a native first-party solution and then start to move the BAS pieces over throughout time, or potentially even leave them there. If you're happy with the performance and you're happy with that calibration setup, you can depend upon that and leverage the continuous monitoring platform for all of that regulatory compliance and reporting aspects. And that's kind of a nice middle ground that'll let you walk from one side all the way to the other.
Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Keith. Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Jason. And a lot of the pharmacy directors that we work with they're responsible for multiple locations across our region, even. And you think about those clean rooms within the main campus on a pharmacy. Well, a lot of those sensors are tied into local controls, so it just makes it easier to pull it from the BAS so that you're getting all of that. But then they got their fridges and freezers within their department, maybe central pharmacy, and then there's retail pharmacy, and then there's the locations on all the floors, and then there's the offsite clinics that you put your arms around all that. You got a single user interface and see everything across the board in one place.
Next, are you aware of any solutions in the marketplace for someone who manages multiple hospitals across multiple nationally that have different BAS and different systems that could pull it all together, kind of like what you described, Jason? What if someone has 12 different BASs? That's possible. And we have people with Census Scientific, Temp Track, people with Stanley, a lot of different systems. Is there anything that can be an aggregator, or does someone have to make I'm going to change everything decision?
Yeah, and frankly, that's really common where we'll see one location has a Honeywell BAS, and then we have a Johnson Controls BAS, and then we have a Schneider BAS. And so, what you're going to look for there is a system that can be flexible, that can talk potentially different, languages that those will talk to pull them out. We're lucky that our CloudLink platform can do that for us. The other thing you can look at doing is you can look at seeing if they have API integrations. So some continuous monitoring providers offer the ability to pull data from other systems via APIs. So it's not something that you, as a subject matter expert in the pharmacy world, necessarily have to be able to implement or know how to do, but it is something that your vendor should be able to help you with and say, sure, if you're able to give us that access to that data, we can pull it and make it show up in our system natively. And then over time, you kind of make that transition over.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. What about ongoing? I know you talk about future, but ongoing maintenance of the different sensors and getting them calibrated. Is that ever proved to be a problem with swapping out and things like that?
No, thinking about the cost of ownership of a system as you continue to use it down the line, I actually have one sitting here as an example of what we do. This is a self-contained glycol buffered sensor here. What we would do, we actually have what we call our snap calibration program. We send these out, and these come with a 1 or a 2 year NIST calibration certificate. Simply unplug the old one, plug the new one in. Calibration's done in about 30 seconds. Your NIST calibration certificate shows up online, so you have access to it all the time. You don't need to worry about where it's being filed and where it's located physically on site. It's there and has access, and we provide a whole history of every single sensor that's ever been plugged in to the system. And so you can look back even and pull those certificates up historically.
That sounds awesome. Now, is that unique to Sonicu or is that common? Because I don't hear a lot of people say it's that easy.
Yeah, it's, it really depends upon the vendor, but the vast majority of vendors still want that revenue from actually sending someone on site to have you perform that calibration. There are situations in which that may make sense for you. ULT, ultra low, like cryotech freezers, depending upon how your setup is, maybe that makes sense for those sensors specifically, but across the board, it's a pretty ineffective or inefficient process to get your calibration, as opposed to doing what Sonicu does in terms of just swapping those out.
Yeah, we're all looking for ways to reduce costs and eliminate efficiencies. Well, I'm so glad you guys came and presented this today. I talk with truly thousands of health systems in my role here at Pharmacy Stars, and this is everybody has continuous monitoring plans upon continuous monitoring, and in different stages. We're very excited about the partnership we have with Sonicu, and that we can make it available to our customers to integrate to eliminate that manual process of reading and documenting. And so you guys have been great to work with, and appreciate it, and looking forward to continuing working together. I don't see any other questions coming in. So before we adjourn, last call, anyone want to bring up anything for this group?
So one thing I will actually go ahead and bring up,
Okay.
one question we get a lot is, what's the best way for me to get my data from those devices to whatever regulatory compliance system I'm using? And what I would say is, it really depends. So look at what you're trying to do and look at your support team around you. If you have a great IT team and you love interacting with your IT staff, you have great Wi-Fi everywhere, Wi-Fi might be a great option. If you don't love working with your IT team, there may be other ways for you to get that data out. Whether that means you're using an Ethernet connection, whether that means you're just going pure cellular, or maybe that means you're using a combination of both of those to help make sure that, well, we love our IT team, but our internet's kind of questionable. It goes in and out a little bit. There are even solutions out there that we and others provide that will allow you to kind of fail over to cellular if you do experience those interruptions. So definitely think about not just how things are going to work whenever things are going well, but think about how these systems are going to work if they're experiencing connectivity interruptions, and make sure your monitoring vendor has a plan in place to get you that data as quickly as possible, even the situation where you have an extended internet outage.
Right. Those type of scenarios or question sets on the handy guide you guys are going to release next week?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, super. Well, again, Michael, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge here. It's really valuable. And all of you who attended today, thank you for taking time to hear about continuous monitoring, 3 common mistakes, and even a couple others. And I look forward to distributing the handy guide you guys are going to put together for today's attendees. So thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.